Chapter 1. The Arrival. It was supposed to be a peaceful escape. After years of teaching in noisy Saigon, Martin, a retired history professor from London, decided to spend 6 quiet months in the Vietnamese countryside to write a book about Southeast Asian folklore. A friend of a friend had offered him a place, a beautiful, simple, wooden house in Tam Lin, a tiny village no one visits anymore. That was exactly what Martin wanted. No tourists, no phones, just foggy hills, rice fields, and stories. The taxi driver grew quiet when Martin showed him the address. "You sure you want to stay there?" he asked, not meeting Martin's eyes. "Yes, why?" "That place, no one lives there. Hasn't for years." "Perfect," Martin chuckled. "I'm not one for neighbors." The driver said nothing after that. The road into Tomlin was barely a road, just dirt and stones winding through bamboo forests and steep hills. The sun began to set, and mist started to creep between the trees. They finally reached the house just as the last light disappeared behind the hills. It stood alone, leaning slightly to one side, surrounded by overgrown grass and dead banana trees. A narrow stone path led to the front porch, where wooden wind chimes swayed in the still air. The house looked older than expected. Blackened wood, cracks in the walls, the roof sagged in places. But Martin loved it. It had character, history, secrets. That night, Martin unpacked, brewed tea, and began taking notes. The silence was complete. No dogs barking, no crickets, just wind. But then, around 3:12 a.m., something woke him. A knock. Soft, rhythmic, like someone tapping a wooden spoon on the wall outside. He sat up, heart thudding. Then silence. Maybe a bird, maybe a branch. He made a note in his journal and went back to sleep. The next morning, Martin walked through the village. Tomlin had no more than 20 houses. Most were empty. A few old women sat weaving mats in the sun. They looked up as he passed. Some nodded, others just stared. He greeted them in Vietnamese, but they didn't reply. In the only small shop, the old man behind the counter paused when Martin mentioned where he was staying. "The last house?" the man asked. Martin nodded. "Yes, the wooden one, near the cliff." "That house was abandoned since 1997. "Well, I'm staying there now." "You shouldn't," the man said quietly, handing Martin a bag of tea. "That house remembers." That night, the wind returned. So did the knocking. This time, it came from the inside wall, right behind his bed. Knock, knock, knock. He held his breath. It stopped. Then, just before dawn, he heard something else. A voice. A woman whispering in Vietnamese. He couldn't understand the words, but he felt them in his bones. Cold, regret, sorrow. The next morning, Martin found a photo in the attic, black and white, a woman in an Aodai, standing by the very porch he now used. The date, June 7th, 1968. On the back, scribbled in red ink, "Forgive me, I had no choice." Martin spent the day trying to rationalize everything. The knocking, the voice, the photo. Maybe the wood was shifting. Maybe his mind, tired from jet lag and years of city noise, was inventing ghosts out of silence. But deep down, something felt wrong. Not just in the house, in the air. It was always cold now, even in the sun, even when he stood by the fire. That evening, he walked deeper into the village. He tried again to speak to the villagers. Most avoided his gaze. Some even stepped back when he came close. Only one woman, thin, wrinkled, with clouded eyes, spoke to him. "You stay in the house," she said in broken English, pointing with a shaking finger. Martin nodded. "Yes. Do you know who lived there?" She stared at him for a long moment. "She still lives there." And then she turned and walked away. That night, he made tea, lit a candle, and sat in the living room to read. Around midnight, it began again. Knock, 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 from the wall. But this time, it didn't stop. Knock, 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 over and over, always in threes, always from behind the wooden walls. Martin stood, pressed his ear to the wall. He heard something between the knocks. Breathing. A woman, breathing hard and fast, like she was afraid. Or dying. He ran outside with a flashlight, thinking maybe someone was playing a trick, but no one was there, only fog. He decided to investigate the wall in the morning. He pushed the old furniture aside, tapping each wooden panel, and then one panel sounded hollow. He pried it open carefully, revealing a small cavity. Inside, wrapped in an old silk scarf, was a diary. The cover was faded, pages yellowed, but the ink was still clear. It belonged to a woman named Lynn. Her first entry was dated June 1967. "I hate this place. I didn't want to marry him. He built this house for me, but it feels like a cage. At night I dream of fire, of a woman crying, but when I wake up, I am the one crying." Martin spent hours reading her words. She spoke of loneliness, of fear, of a husband who was never named. "He whispers to me in my sleep, but it's not love. It's like he's planting something inside me, something that grows and listens. Last night I woke to find him digging under the floor. When I asked what he was doing, he said, 'I'm making space for later.'" The diary ended abruptly. He said, "I can't leave, that my spirit belongs to this house. If you find this, know that I tried. Please, don't sleep in this house. It watches you." Martin closed the diary with shaking hands. The room felt colder. He turned slowly and saw a shadow move across the far wall. But nothing had moved. He began to notice other things. The mirror in the bathroom steamed over, even when the water was cold. Sometimes he'd wake up to find the front door open. Twice he found muddy footprints in the hallway. Small ones, barefoot. He tried to stay awake all night. He made tea, played music, sat in the kitchen with all the lights on. At 3:12 a.m., the same time as before, the lights went out. Every bulb. Gone. Then, the whispers came. This time, clearer. "Help me. He buried me behind the fire." Martin turned to the fireplace. There was a loose brick near the bottom. He hadn't noticed it before. He took a crowbar and pried it free. Behind the brick, wrapped in cloth, was a small human skull. He didn't scream. He couldn't. He just sat, staring at it, until dawn. Martin didn't sleep the next night. He couldn't. The image of the tiny skull, wrapped in decaying cloth and hidden behind his fireplace, burned itself into his brain. He tried to convince himself it was an animal, but it wasn't. The shape, the teeth, the eye sockets, it was human. A child. Or someone very small. At sunrise, he returned to the diary. He reread the final entry. Ominous. "If you find this, please don't sleep in this house. It watches you." But who was watching? The house? The husband? Or something else? Martin took photos of the skull. He wanted to send them to someone, anyone. But his phone had stopped working. No signal, no Wi-Fi. Even the village shop, which had working electricity before, was now boarded shut when he visited. No one answered the door. No one spoke to him anymore. It was like the village had decided he no longer existed. That night, the wind howled so loudly it sounded like a woman screaming. He closed every window, every door. Still, the screams seeped through. At 3:12 a.m., the same knocking returned, but this time it came from beneath the floor. Knock, knock, knock. Then a whisper. Under me. Under me. Martin stood in the center of the living room. The knocking came from right below his feet. He fetched a flashlight, a hammer, and a small axe from the shed. The floorboards were old, some were already cracked. He pried them up carefully. Beneath the boards was packed earth. He dug with his hands, and then he hit something hard. Wood. A small chest. He pulled it out, brushing off the dirt. Inside, a lock of hair tied with red string. A wedding ring, rusted and bent. A photograph, burned on one side. A note, in Vietnamese, written in blood-red ink. He unfolded the note. I buried the child with her, so it wouldn't follow its mother, so the crying would stop. Martin staggered back. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a murder. Maybe two. Suddenly, the candle beside him went out. The air grew cold. He turned. In the doorway stood a figure. A woman in a white yo, soaked, hair hanging over her face. Her eyes were dark voids. Her hands were shaking. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Martin couldn't breathe. Then she screamed, a high, broken, inhuman wail, and vanished. Martin collapsed. When he awoke, it was dawn. Everything looked normal, peaceful, as if nothing had happened. But the hole in the floor was still there. So was the chest. So was the fear. He needed answers. He walked to the far end of the village, to a tiny house where he'd seen incense burning on the porch. Inside, an old monk sat in silence. Martin begged him for help, showing the diary, the photograph, and the burned note. The monk read them slowly, then nodded.
The house was cursed, long ago,
He said in careful English.
A man brought his wife here after the war. She was not willing. She tried to leave.
Martin leaned in. What happened?
He stopped her, forever. She was buried under the floor. When she screamed in the night, he buried their child with her, so the crying would end.
Martin felt sick. Why does she appear now? Why me? The monk lit a stick of incense and whispered something ancient. Then he looked at Martin.
Because you listened. Most don't.
The monk handed him a bag of black rice, a candle made from cypress wax, and a thin red thread.
Bury the bones properly. Say her name if you know it. Tie the thread at your door. But know this, she does not only want peace. She remembers. She wants justice.
That night, Martin returned to the house. He placed the skull in a wooden box, filled it with the black rice, and tied the red thread around it. He walked to the bamboo grove behind the house and dug deep. As he lowered the box into the earth, the wind rose. Branches snapped. Leaves spun in circles. The house behind him moaned. He whispered, I'm sorry. I know what happened to you, Lynn. You didn't deserve this. He lit the cypress candle and placed it beside the grave. The flame turned blue. Then, for the first time in days, everything went quiet. That night, Martin finally slept. No whispers, no knocks, no visions. Just silence. But just before dawn, he awoke to a single sound. The cry of a baby. Very soft. Coming from the attic. Martin thought it was over. He had buried the remains, he had said her name. The monk's ritual seemed to have worked. But peace didn't last. The crying he heard in the attic grew louder each night. It wasn't just a baby anymore. Sometimes it was a woman sobbing, sometimes a man yelling in Vietnamese. Once he heard scratching, like nails dragging along wood. He finally climbed into the attic. It was mostly empty, just old boards, cobwebs, dust. But in the far corner, someone had carved into the wood, dozens of times, repeated over and over again. I am still here. That night, Martin set up a camera in the attic. He wanted to catch whatever was making the noise. But when he checked the footage the next morning, the camera had melted. Not damaged, melted. The air inside the house changed. It smelled of smoke and rain. The mirrors became fogged permanently, no matter how much he wiped them. The photographs on the walls, photos of his grandfather, of old family trips, began to change. Smiles faded, eyes blurred. In one photo, Lynn's reflection appeared standing behind him. He went to the village again, but it was empty. No people, no sound, no birds, just rows of houses, doors shut, windows black. He stood in the square and shouted, "Hello!" No answer, but the wind carried back a voice, a woman's whisper. You brought her back. When he returned to the house, something had changed. The walls were bleeding. Not real blood, but black liquid, thick and slow, seeping from the cracks in the wood. He packed a bag. He was ready to leave. But when he opened the front door, it was no longer the road outside. Again. He had walked out and back in, like the house had looped in on itself. He tried every window, every door. No matter where he ran, he always ended up back in the kitchen, the fireplace, the floor, the diary. That night, he slept in the car. But he woke up back in bed, with the red thread from the ritual wrapped tightly around his neck. He saw her again that day, in full form. Lynn. No longer just a shadow or blur, she stood in the hallway, soaked, skin pale as bone, black hair clinging to her face. Her eyes were wide and burning with hatred. She opened her mouth, too wide, unnaturally wide, and screamed. From her mouth, dozens of voices poured out. Children, women, men, all screaming at once. Then silence. She vanished again. Martin broke. He screamed at the house. What do you want? A whisper from the walls. Justice. Show them. Make them see. He understood now. It wasn't just about burial or memory. She wanted everyone to know what had happened, what had been done to her. In the diary's final page, there was something Martin had missed before, scratched faintly in the bottom margin. He filmed it, locked in the cellar, behind the wall. He had never found a cellar, but now he knew what to look for. He searched the kitchen floor for hollow spots. Near the back wall, under a loose cabinet, he found a hidden panel. He pried it open. A steep staircase descended into darkness. He grabbed a lantern. The cellar was small, damp. Walls made of stone. In the far corner, an old wooden cabinet. Inside was a reel-to-reel film projector and a box of tapes. Most were rotted, but one had a label still visible. Lynn, 1710-1967. He carried it upstairs, set it up on the projector. The reel began to play. Grainy, black and white footage flickered onto the wall. At first, just the front of the house. Then, a woman, Lynn, sitting on the porch, looking away. Then a man appears. Martin's grandfather. Young, tall, cold-eyed. He walks behind Lynn, places his hand on her shoulder. She flinches. He slaps her. She falls. Then the camera cuts. Next clip, the living room. She's tied to a chair, crying, bleeding, begging in Vietnamese. The man just watches, drinks tea, then stands, walks to the camera, smiles.
Turns it off.
Martin shut the projector off. He was shaking, sweating, sick. His grandfather wasn't a hero. He was a monster. Suddenly, the walls began to shake. The floor cracked. Smoke poured from the fireplace. From it, Lynn emerged. Not as a woman now, as a spirit of fire and vengeance. Her eyes burned like coals. Her mouth opened again. Now you know. Commanding. Show them. Threatening. Or stay here. Forever. Martin nodded, resolutely. I will. Martin couldn't sleep anymore. Not after what he had seen. Not after the tape. Not after Lynn's face. Bruised, begging, broken. His grandfather was no hero. He was a monster. And the house? It wasn't just haunted. It was demanding justice. That night, Lynn appeared again. For the first time, she spoke clearly. Her voice was cold, controlled, human. Coldly. Tell them. Show them. Ominously. Or you stay. She handed Martin an old piece of paper. A forged death certificate. It claimed she died from an accidental fall in 1967. He knew better now. She was killed. He nodded slowly, determinedly. I'll do it. Martin set up his camera. He recorded a video. Not for horror fans, not for views, but for the truth. His confession, gravely. This house belonged to my grandfather. In 1967, he tortured and killed a woman named Lynn. She was never buried properly, never remembered. Somberly, but she never left. He included everything. The diary, the attic carvings, the film reel, and finally, Lynn's face. When he tried to upload it, the internet failed. Again. But then, Lynn whispered from the walls, "Try again." Martin pressed upload. It worked. The video hit 100 views, then 1,000, then 50,000. Comments flooded in. Is this real? This woman deserves justice. My grandmother remembers this case. We have to find her grave. The moment the video went viral, the house shook violently. Glass shattered, doors slammed. A fire ignited in the fireplace, but it was cold. Smoke rose, and from it, Lynn appeared. No longer angry, no longer broken. She looked calm, peaceful. They know now. Thank you. She faded into the smoke, and for the first time the house fell silent. The front door opened. Martin stepped outside into the light. The mist was gone. The village was alive again. People walking, birds singing. He was free. 3 years later, Martin released a documentary called She Never Left. It won international awards. Millions heard Lynn's story. But each year, on October 17th, Martin receives a file on his laptop. No sender, no explanation. Just one line of text. I'm still here.